Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing just fine. What I want to do in this video is that I want to do the second part of the female reproductive system. On the first part of the female reproductive system, I just went over external genitalia. But on this video, what I want to focus on is more in detail is the ovarian cycle, the menstrual cycle, ovarian cycle collectively, the activity that is going on to prepare the uterus for implantation, and also to prepare or mature those oocytes so it can be fertilized by the sperm. Okay, so let's go over first the ovarian cycle. Okay, the ovarian cycle is just basically all the activity that's going on inside the ovary. So let me show you a model on that. Okay, so here's a model of the ovary. Okay. And you can see the activity that's going on here inside the ovary. Okay, you can see the eggs being produced. Okay. All right, so we discussed that the male produces about 1 million sperm a day. Well, the female is a little bit less than the male. Okay. In the ovarian cycle, this stage is called oogenesis. Okay, and in oogenesis, this process begins during fetal development. When female reproductive stem cells called oogonia undergo mitosis, producing primary oocytes. After 5 months of development, fetal ovaries contain an estimated 7 million primary oocytes. Not all survive. At birth, the ovaries have approximately 2 million primary oocytes. Okay, so however, most of these primary oocytes, the 2 million upon birth, do not survive until puberty, degenerating in a process called atresia. By puberty, their number has dropped to 400,000 primary oocytes. Okay? The remaining primary oocytes begin meiosis 1, proceeding as far as prophase 1, and then remain in the state until it reaches puberty. So let me show you a model of some of the stages here. Okay, we saw this for the male here on this side. Okay, let's look at the female side. Okay, so here you have the oogonium, and then that oogonium will divide mitotically into primary oocytes right here, and the primary oocytes will be 7 million at 5 months of fetal life, and then eventually 2 million primary oocytes upon birth. Primary oocytes suspended in prophase of meiosis 1. Meiosis 1 is complete on ovulation. Then the secondary oocytes suspended in metaphase of meiosis 2. And meiosis 2 is complete upon fertilization. And that secondary oocyte will now be called a mature ovum, which you can see here and here. Okay, so that's meiosis of the mitosis, then meiosis 1 and 2 of the female egg. All right, so let's look at the ovarian cycle here on this model. Okay, so here, well, this is an ovary. Up here you see the mesovarium. This part is attached to the uterus. Ovarian ligament, mesovarium. Here you have the round ligament. Underneath here you have the broad ligament. Okay, so that holds the ovary up in space. So when you're jumping up and down, going to side to side, the ovary is going with you. Okay. So here we can see the primordial egg nest. Okay, these are all primary oocytes. So primary follicles, still primary oocytes. Okay. So here's a secondary ovarian follicle. This is just to say secondary follicle, not secondary ovarian follicle. Here the tertiary follicle ovulates that secondary oocyte, and then it forms a corpus luteum, which is the start of the luteal phase. And that secretes a sex hormone, estrogen, mainly progesterone. So in the follicular phase, a pre-ovulatory phase, so this is ovulation, so this is what's happening before ovulation. This is within the first 14 days. This is the 14th day, and this is from days 14 to 28. So the follicular phase starts with primordial follicles to primary follicles to secondary follicle to tertiary follicle. And when the tertiary follicle releases that secondary oocyte, the follicular phase ends. Generally, on day 14 of 28 days ovarian cycle, the secondary oocyte and its surrounding follicular cells lose their connections with the follicular wall and drift free within the antrum, within the space of the tertiary follicle. The granulosa cells still associated with secondary oocyte form a protective layer known as the corona radiata. So you can see here, see the corona radiata right out here. You can see the secondary oocyte. So let's talk about ovulation. The tertiary follicle releases the secondary oocyte. You can see the secondary oocyte right there, a little hole right there. That's going to be letting out the secondary oocyte right there. Okay, so let's look at the luteal phase. That's what's happening after ovulation. So the luteal phase, after ovulation, the luteal phase or post-ovulatory phase begins. This phase ends with the degeneration of the corpus luteum. So that corpus luteum degenerates. Okay. The empty tertiary ovarian follicle initially collapses. And you can see here, this is the tertiary follicle. Okay, you can see a little bit of blood inside there, but it already released that secondary oocyte. Okay. Progesterone is the main hormone during the luteal phase. Okay, you can see it here, a little bit of scar tissue. Okay. So tertiary follicle, corpus hemorrhagic or corpus rubrum, and then here you have the corpus luteum. Progesterone's primary function is to prepare the uterus for pregnancy by stimulating the maturation of the uterine lining and secretions of uterine glands. The corpus luteum also secretes moderate amounts of estrogen, but levels are not as high as they were at ovulation. So at ovulation, estrogen levels are high, then corpus luteum estrogen levels are low, but progesterone levels are high. Formation of corpus albicans. The corpus luteum begins to degenerate about 12 days after ovulation, unless fertilization takes place. Okay. Progesterone and estrogen levels then decline markedly. Fibroblasts invade the non-functional corpus luteum, producing a knot of pale scar tissue called corpus albicans. So luteum means yellow, albino means white, so corpus albicans. Okay. The degeneration of the corpus luteum marks the end of the ovarian cycle. A new ovarian cycle then begins with another group of tertiary ovarian follicles. So that's pretty much the end of the ovarian cycle. So now let's get into the uterine cycle or the menstrual cycle. So that's just going to be the preparation of the uterus. So let me start a little story. Let me get into a little story of the menstrual cycle before I get into it. Okay. My professor, he told a story which still sticks to me till this day. The menstrual cycle is similar to like a princess in a high tower, okay, waiting for her prince to come, go up the tower and come and get her. So every month, what the female does, what this princess does, is that she cleans the curtains, cleans the bed, sweeps the floor, has everything nice and clean. So when the prince comes and sees her, he'll be impressed with not just her, which is a plus, number one, but the location is looks pretty much new and refreshed and appealing and inviting. Okay, and then so what happens is she waits for the prince to come and waits for a whole month, and then if nothing happens, she takes everything down, takes down the curtains, the bed sheets, and she does the whole process again. Cleans the floor, cleans the curtains, cleans the bed sheets, gets the food ready, and if he doesn't come, breaks everything down and puts everything back up again every single month. And this will happen until that prince comes up. And when the prince comes up and finally sees her and is happy with her and happy with the location, they consummate. They come together and the menstrual cycle ends. Okay? And then 9 months later, she'll start up again. But this time she has her prince, hopefully, and and she'll get the place ready every month until she is pregnant once again. Okay, so this is what the menstrual cycle is doing. The menstrual cycle, what it's doing is it's getting the uterus every month. It's sloughing off the inner layer of the endometrium of the uterus, which is the endometrium. The endometrium has two parts, a functionalis and basal. The functionalis is what sloughs off every month, and the basal becomes a new functionalis. So let's look at that real quick. So you can see here, this is the endometrium, the myometrium, and the perimetrium. Here's the endometrium with the two layers. You have the functionalis in pink and the basal in red. So this is the part, the functionalis, that sloughs off, that comes off, little skin, sheets of skin coming off of your body every month. And that skin eventually will come out throughout the menstrual cycle, and that's when the girls get their hygiene gear to pick up that blood flow. Okay. All right. So that breaks down, and then the endometrial, the basal becomes new functionalis, and the uterus will rebuild that endometrial lining again and get that environment ready for the sperm to come up the vagina to the uterus and then eventually to the fallopian tube to meet the egg. And then that fertilized egg will come into the endometrium, or the inner lining of the uterus, which is the endometrium, implant itself in there. And if there's no fertilization occurring, no sperm going there for that month, then sloughs off, comes out, and then right away, the next 30 days, the new wall will be built. Okay, so that's the story of the princess waiting for the sperm, waiting for the male to come up. He doesn't come up, breaks everything down, and starts over again for the next month. Hopefully that'll help you out. Okay, so let me just show you here a plaque. So you can see here what's happening. This is the ovarian cycle here with the primordial follicles, primary oocyte, or primary follicle, which is the primary oocyte, secondary follicle, which is the primary oocyte, and then tertiary follicle, releasing a secondary oocyte. And here you have the corpus luteum and corpus albicans. This is in a 28-day cycle. So that's the ovarian cycle. And here's the menstrual cycle. So we're going to talk about these phases here. So the first one, the menstrual phase. You see these little dots here? Okay, so that's one. You can't see. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So each dot represents a day. So 1 through 7. So you can see here, this is the menses, okay, or the menstrual phase. Okay. Now let's go to the proliferative phase, which is this one here. You can see it marked by days 5 to days 12. Okay. So here you see the proliferative phase, and here you can see what's happening with the ovary. See, so the tertiary follicle is starting to grow really big within that proliferative phase. So these ovarian follicles are releasing estrogen and maintaining that proliferative phase. By the time ovulation occurs, right here, ovulation, the functional layer is several millimeters thick. Prominent mucus glands extend to its border with the basal layer. At this time, the uterine glands are manufacturing mucus that is rich in glycogen. This specialized mucus appears to be essential for the survival of the fertilized egg. So the uterine glands within the endometrium produces glycogen, and that glycogen helps the fertilized egg to grow in the beginning stages. Okay, so this is the secretory. This green denotes the ovulation of the secondary oocyte. Now this is the secretory phase from days 15 to 28. In a 28-day cycle, a normal 28-day cycle, it depends on the woman and the activity she does, and and her hormone levels. It's not all going to be the same, but pretty much in the same ballpark. But the secretory phase begins at the time of ovulation and persists as long as the corpus luteum remains intact. Secretory activities peak about 12 days after ovulation. Over the next day or two, the glands become less active. The uterine cycle ends as the corpus luteum stops producing stimulatory hormones. A new uterine cycle then begins with the onset of menstruation and the disintegration of the functional layer. The secretory phase generally lasts 14 days. For this reason, you can identify the date of ovulation by counting backwards 14 days from the first day of menstruation. So it'll be ideal if you want to get pregnant as soon as when the menstrual cycle ends, or actually when the menstrual cycle menses begins, just count 14 days back from that point, and that will be the ideal time to meet that secondary, to have that secondary oocyte meet the sperm, okay, to get pregnant. Okay, so that's pretty much the menstrual cycle. We did the ovarian cycle. I'm hoping that this will help a lot of girls that don't understand their body as they're growing up, and they're too embarrassed to talk to their parents about it, or it's a little bit too complicated for them to understand. Hopefully this video will help you out. Okay. All right. Understand that there's two activities going on in the ovary to produce that egg that'll be fertilized by the sperm, and rebuilding of that uterine wall, breaking down of the uterine wall and building it back up every month, so it can get that uterine wall, so you can get that uterus ready for the implantation of that ovary, of that fertilized egg. Okay. And also you can time when you start your menses. You have that blood flow, you start your menses, you can count back 14 days at that moment. Count back 14 days, and that would be ovulation. And that would be the ideal time to get pregnant. Okay, so that's pretty much it with the ovarian cycle and the menstrual cycle. Make sure to like and subscribe. Take care, good luck, and goodbye.